They were enrolled into new versions of our own tribes, which is how mixed kids could grow up to become leaders like John Ross and Major Ridge. You see that? 132nd Cherokee. Why? Because they're getting less and less Cherokee with each generation.
Blood quantum has been used to weed out Native Americans.
Black people are specifically excluded from Amerindian identity on the basis of not descending from people on the tribal rolls.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up out of your sleep, sleep.
Today's drop is major. Evidence shows that tribal rolls predominantly enrolled families comprised of mixed Indian women and European men in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Today, we're going to look at that evidence, but because my research on this is so comprehensive, we only have time to cover the Dawes Roll. Furthermore, we're going to focus specifically on the Cherokee. We're going to do it by deep diving the Oklahoma Historical Society's database, which isn't being serviced at the time of this recording due to the government shutdown. Now, even if this is true, how does this prove anything about black people? Let me break that down first for new viewers, some of whom I understand are Native Americans who want answers. First of all, several American universities jointly pooled years of research to create the Slave Voyages database, so mainstream news media and the government itself trust that source above all others. That source shows us that from 1619 all the way to the Civil War, only 388,747 slaves were ever successfully brought to the mainland North America in the transatlantic slave trade. The other 10.3 million slaves were scattered across South America and the Caribbean. So 388,747, that's the number right as we enter the Civil War, which leads to the abolition of slavery and the eventual emancipation of colored slaves. Mind you, the abolition of the enslavement of American Indians had already happened in one state at a time long before this. However, the problem is that the census right before the Civil War showed 4.4 million of us in mainland North America, almost 12 times as many people as those brought from Africa. I've done lots of presentations on the statistical significance of this already, because the next problem is that the mainstream counterargument relies on the slave breeding narrative. How did we grow 12-fold in less than 250 years? Slave masters forced us to reproduce at an alarming rate. I've shown you the preeminent expert demographic historian, Dr. J. David Hacker, reporting that our population growth in that time frame represents a biological maximum, quote unquote, for a population of its size. And that's without even accounting for the fact that only a third of all African slaves were even women. So even if the slave birth rate was as astronomical as the data suggests, the early generations would have been no less than half indigenous at a minimum, because the female slaves with whom they were bred were predominantly American Indians. I brought that up in another presentation where I showed you that scholars actually don't trust the slave breeding narrative at all due to a severe and unanimously acknowledged lack of evidence. I could go on and on, but the bottom line is that we have an incredibly strong argument for the transatlantic slave trade being insufficient to account for even half of our population. Side note, we are not slave trade deniers. We just trust the data that diverse researchers have recorded on the subject. So mathematically, we have to be more indigenous than African, yet we don't fit the legal definitions for any of the statutory classifications that the government has given to American Indians, which is why you need to support Unehiya. Unehiya is lobbying Congress right now to get us recognized as predominantly aboriginal to this land under a new statutory classification. Hit the link in the description to go vote on what that reclassification should be. We don't have an indigenous classification because we genuinely have a long history of separation from recognized Indian populations. Why is that? We procreated with colonizers and thereby created two different types of Indians. Andrew Jackson is documented as having referred to the Indians of the Southeast as, quote unquote, the half-breeds and the full-bloods. By half-breed, he meant mixed, biracial. We're confirming this exact thing in an Ivy League study that I showed you in a previous presentation, and the same source shows us that Andrew Jackson referred to the full-bloods as, quote unquote, the real Indians. His words, not mine. We gave leadership positions to the biracial Indian man because he could speak English, which he learned from his father, the colonizer. His mother taught him the ways of our people, but his father guided him to marry a European woman, making the bloodline increasingly European. The biracial Indian gave away everything to please his father, assimilating with European ways as much as possible to be accepted by whites. If you know anything about John Ross and Major Ridge, these facts are easily verifiable for you. John Ross was principal chief of the Cherokee during the removal period. They were the leaders Andrew Jackson dealt with, yet they were both Europeans with very little indigenous blood. Since the Indian with whom Europeans negotiated most often were the biracial ones, Europeans refer to those people as the Indians to this day. Biracial Indians in the Southeast were removed because they agreed to removal against the will of the full-blood Indians. The original Indians were never removed because we were the warriors and hunters. The regiments that deployed from forts throughout the Southeast didn't come get us for fear of combat. They rarely ever fought us without the help of other Indians, and they were afraid of direct confrontation. They removed our biracial leadership and aristocracy to Oklahoma, however. And those people have replaced us and been given our identity. They were enrolled into new versions of our own tribes, trimmed down to biracial Indian women in interracial marriages with white men. And where's the proof of that? That's what I'm about to show you. Guys, what we're about to talk about is a game changer. In short, Unehiya is a small team of highly capable individuals trying to lobby Congress for federal recognition of Black Americans as pre-Columbian American Indians. I'm one of them. I'm the public information officer, so I'm out front recruiting and providing information. I'm also handling PR because of my background in print journalism. Right now, we're focused on a well-planned lobbying campaign to get the Negro recognized as the American Indian, and our campaign strategy hinges on exploiting a quasi-legal precedent in an amendment proposal for a dormant Senate resolution that already exists. I want to appeal to everyone watching this video to support the campaign by joining Unehiya. And guess what? You don't even have to know a single thing about politics or history. Just help us build our list of demands and help each other use Unehiya's genealogy tools to identify your ancestral tribes. Vote yes or no on the hundreds of decisions we have to make. Participate in our tribal town hall meetings after every new moon. Look, I'm not asking for super chats or any other donations to my own pocket. If you've got any spare change, use it to become a stakeholder in Unehiya, which can be done for as little as $7. You can opt into stakeholder leadership for about $20 if you've got the budget for it, which gives you greater voting power on the decisions we make as a tribe. Believe it or not, it only takes 5 minutes to help us reclassify ourselves as Indians. Let's go! Cherokee Chief John Ross was an octoroon, meaning he was 1/8 Black. The Cherokee Phoenix reports this as 1/8 Indian, but we've demonstrated repeatedly on this channel that the Indians were Black. The core of Cherokee society in his day was like him, mixed. Why? Because Cherokee culture by then had begun to privilege the children of interracial marriages, which is how mixed kids could grow up to become leaders like John Ross and Major Ridge. That never stopped happening. Those of us who married whites back then kept doing so all the way into the present. A Pew Research study reports, quote, American Indians have the highest interracial marriage rate among all single race groups. Women are slightly more likely to marry out than men in this group. 61% of American Indian female newlyweds married outside their race, compared with 54% of American Indian male newlyweds. End quote. So from John Ross in 1815 to the Pew Research study in 2015, we see interracial marriage. It shouldn't surprise you that I'm about to show you the same was true in the middle, from 1898 to 1914, when the Dawes Roll was established. Most of the removed families were already mixed, whereas the so-called full-bloods were left behind in the original territory. A lot of these families were still marrying out when the Dawes Roll was created, so I'm showing you incontrovertible evidence to that effect. We're going to the Oklahoma Historical Society's database and we're looking up blood card 8358. For those who don't know, most Native American nations have tribal enrollment cards, which constitute another form of ID for Native Americans. It proves you're a member of the tribe, but there are different types of tribal cards, such as blood cards and intermarriage cards and freedman cards, for example. Blood card 8358 was registered to the Curry family, and it specifically notes that George was transferred to Cherokee intermarried card 208. See that? And the page also shows us multiple children listed out for this family on the same card. What does all this mean? It means that this is a Native American family from over 120 years ago whose head of household is just a white man who married into the family. We can actually confirm this further using the enrollment jacket for card 208. The NARA catalog entry has an intermarried white file tied to this family group. NARA stands for National Archives and Records Administration. This confirms he's a white Native American, and his wife is the actual Cherokee. Given what we've already demonstrated about Cherokee in the 19th century, though, I guarantee you she's mixed out already too. Nevertheless, the descendants of families like this one live on as Cherokee today, despite marrying Europeans generation after generation after generation. Let's pivot to Cherokee by blood card 5154 to look at the Heffelfinger family. Greenville P. Heffelfinger is explicitly said to be transferred to Cherokee intermarried card 47. He's the head of this Native American household, yet he's on the Cherokee intermarried whites roll. This is not a coincidence. We're going to talk about what it all means in a sec. We're not even done yet. Here's another blood card. 4018. 4018. We're looking at the Parks family, and I'm focusing your attention on John Parks. As you can see, it says he was transferred to Cherokee intermarried card 88. He's put on an intermarried card to delineate that his relation to the tribe is not by blood. Yet his offspring with his Native American wife are simply Cherokee. Not only that, I want you to examine how this works for those descendants. We can see that the mother, Margaret, is 1/16 Cherokee by blood, which is a very small fraction. She's probably 15/16 European, yet that one drop of Indian blood makes her Indian. There's your one drop rule. But John doesn't have any Indian blood whatsoever. So for all the kids, you see what you see that? You see what? 1/32 Cherokee. Why? Because they're getting less and less Cherokee with each generation by doing this. Their grandmother was 1/8 Cherokee, but that got cut in half, and now mom's blood quantum's getting cut in half again because dad has no Cherokee blood. And this will only continue. How do we know? Because Aura, the 17-year-old daughter, just married a non-citizen, meaning someone who's not Cherokee. At this point, This isn't an Indian family anymore at all. If you're 31 out of 32 parts European, you're European. Mind you, we'll do a separate presentation in the near future on blood quantum and how that works. We don't have time right now, but suffice it to say, Native Americans are not oblivious to the fact that they're mixed. Blood quantum is a system that congenitally illustrates that fact. First, Curry, next, Heffelfinger, and now Parks. 1 is an incident, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. The Ichiti principle of discernment. We've demonstrated a pattern of Cherokee families on the Dawes Roll precipitating from interracial marriages. The existence of the pattern suggests we would only find more of this if we kept digging, which is true, we would. Why does this pattern matter? Because black people are specifically excluded from Amerindian identity on the basis of not descending from people on the tribal rolls. If you want to prove you're a Cherokee today, you would need to genealogically connect yourself to a carded ancestor on the tribal roll, which is unlikely. It's unlikely because, as I've explained in past presentations, it was primarily the mixed Cherokee who went to Oklahoma in the first place. Non-mixed Cherokee never left Cherokee land. Don't forget, in that same video I mentioned earlier where I showed you how the Cherokee leadership was mixed, I also showed you a book entitled After the Trail of Tears, The Cherokees' Struggle for Sovereignty, 1839 to 1880, wherein we read on page 73 of that book, quote, while slavery was less common among full-blood Cherokee because these people tended to live in more isolated settlements away from European American influence and trade, both full-blood and mixed-blood Cherokee became slave owners. End quote. So the full-blood Cherokee lived on isolated settlements out in the wilderness because they were distancing themselves from European influence, and that European influence was taking over the cities in Cherokee country. This was at the time of Indian removal. And when U.S. troops herded Cherokee to Oklahoma, they used routes that went directly to those towns from U.S. forts. They didn't go searching the rural outskirts for more Indians, they just escorted the ones in the towns. The full-bloods stayed in those settlements undisturbed until whites later came trying to develop real estate. See, this is why I dismiss the claim that Native Americans are Asian. I've had lots of our people in the comment section on my previous videos insisting that Native Americans are Asian, despite the fact that I produce receipt upon receipt to illustrate that they're just mixed black and white over multiple generations. These facts are extremely well documented and preserved. No one's trying to hide it from us. We just need to learn where to look for it. We don't need to resort to unsubstantiated claims. We don't need to rely on conspiracy theories to prove any of this. Today, we focused on the Cherokee, but in future presentations, we'll look at other tribes. Why? Because you need to see it on their documentation and hear it from their own lips to really believe what I'm telling you. When you look at these Native Americans today and wonder why they look the way they do, this is your answer. The enrollment period was 120 years ago, and the Native Americans you see today descended from them with multiple generations in between. Most of those generations involved more interracial marriage, just like the marriages back then. They're still doing it today. So you should recognize their tan white complexion and dark hair as features that indicate they mixed out multiple times. These papers are telling you that they're Indians and you're not, but blood is thicker than papers.
We are often stereotyped into this picture, and if we don't fit that, then we're not legitimately Indian. When you first met me, what did you think? You think, well, where's her brown skin? Where's the feathers? I mean, this is I don't think you did. But and I guess it's a rhetorical question. Oh hell yes. So
well, are you 100% Native American?
No, absolutely not.
What percentage are you?
And that's. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. What other? So blood quantum is an imposition from the federal government that has been used to weed out Native Americans. Blood quantum is an imposition from the federal government that has been used to weed out Native Americans. Blood quantum has been used to weed out Native Americans. So I'm Polish and Choctaw. So I'm Polish and Choctaw. So I'm Polish